It makes me think how hard it is to remember our memories, to remember the Gaza before the genocide, because right now we're remembering a city that in a way or another no longer exists. For me, what I like about Gaza is the people, the simplicity of it, like the sea, the streets, everything in Gaza just feels different and unique. And that's specifically because Gaza lives under siege, under occupation. There's always limited hours of electricity, limited clean water. We have limitation, restriction of movement, even the sea. There's a limit to how much you can fish in the sea. Yet with all these limitations and restrictions, we managed to make Gaza a special and a unique place.
Ciao a tutte e tutti, ben ritrovati con il Wired Next Fest. Io sono Filippo Di Salvo, sono un ricercatore e un collaboratore di Wired. Queste sono le ultime parole che sentirete da parte nostra in italiano, perché il panel sarà in inglese, ma al QR code che vedete alle mie spalle potete accedere alla traduzione in italiano tramite i vostri smartphone. E grazie mille ovviamente. Questo panel tratta di Gaza, tratta di quello che sta succedendo nella striscia di Gaza da ormai più di 2 anni, parlerà di guerra, parlerà di genocidio. Non sentirete solamente la mia voce, ma abbiamo 2 testimoni che hanno visto nel primo caso direttamente Gaza o che stanno aiutando tramite la tecnologia a migliorare quella che è una delle peggiori condizioni mai vissute da un essere umano sulla Terra. Il panel è diviso in 2 momenti, abbiamo una prima ospite per la prima metà e un secondo ospite per la seconda. I'll finally switch to English to introduce you our first guest, who is Plestia Alaqad, who is a Palestinian journalist from Gaza who is connected with us through the internet. How are you, Plestia? It's great to have you in Italy, although through the internet today.
Thank you so much for having me. I wish I was here face to face, but I'm glad I'm virtually with you, everyone. Thank you all for being here.
It's so great to see you. And my first question for you starts from the title of your book, which is The Eyes of Gaza, through which you are giving to the world your testimony, your witnessing of what you experience in Gaza. You are originally from Gaza, I was telling the audience before. And the book is also an attempt to show the real Gaza, to show your home. So my first question for you is, what is Gaza to you? And my reading of your book is also that it's an attempt to show a different story rather than the one of the war, rather than the one of the occupation, the one of the genocide. So I'm wondering, what is Gaza to you, and what is the final goal of your book?
I was born and raised in Gaza. I lived there my whole life. It's my homeland. It's everything I know. The other day, I was talking to my friends and I was thinking how in a couple of days it will be 2 years of a genocide. And these 2 years of a genocide where we saw Palestinians getting killed, houses demolished, we saw like our homeland. Basically, we can't even recognize it anymore because of how demolished it is. It makes me think how hard it is to remember our memories, to remember the Gaza before the genocide, because right now we're remembering a city that in a way or another no longer exists. For me, what I like about Gaza is the people, the simplicity of it, like the sea, the streets, everything in Gaza just feels different and unique. And that's specifically because Gaza lives under siege, under occupation. There's always limited hours of electricity, limited clean water. We have limitation, restriction of movement, even the sea. There's a limit to how much you can fish in the sea. Yet with all these limitations and restrictions, we managed to make Gaza a special and a unique place. That's why through my book, The Eyes of Gaza, I tried not only to document the genocide and talk about the genocide, but also to talk about my memories in Gaza and to talk about the Gaza I know, because I wish this book wasn't written. I wish I wrote a book under different circumstances that was about the story of Gaza before the genocide, the story of hope. The other day, I wrote an article with GQ magazine about Nasser brothers. They're two filmmakers. They made a film about Gaza and they won an award. And this interview and article, it meant a lot to me because I was like, yes, these are the stories I want to document, stories of Palestinians, Gazans that are alive, are creating films, are winning awards, and are flourishing in lives. Like, I don't want to keep seeing Palestinian people getting killed.
And there are many lines in your book that are really touching, but there's one that impressed me also as a journalist when you write that you are for Israeli aggressions hold. And of course, we just mentioned that this genocide is now ongoing for 2 years, but the story of the oppression of Palestine, the story of oppression of Gaza is of course much longer. And how difficult is to you and to Palestinian voices to give this sense of historical perspective about what is going on in your country?
Oh my God, it's such a difficult question.
I'm sorry.
It's sad how us Palestinians, we mark our birthdays and everything by what's happening in the country. For example, I know when is my friend's birthday. She's my mom's friend. She's in her 50s. The reason I know when is her birthday, because I know, oh, she was born a year after the Nakba, a year before the Nakba, 1948, or oh, born in the Naksa, 1967, oh, born in October 2023. It's like we know our birthdays, we know how old we are, judging what's happening in our homeland. That's why, okay, I'm turning 24 in December. I'll be 24, but I obviously feel older than that because of all the Israeli aggressions and genocide that I witnessed. That's why I wanted to say, yes, I'm for Israeli aggressions all. And I feel like I don't want to say unique. I feel like unique is the wrong word, but this just shows how Israel unfortunately succeeded in dividing and isolating us from the rest of the world by experience, meaning the experience of a person in Gaza is different from a person living in the Netherlands, for example. In Gaza, when we see tents, it's a traumatizing thing. Tents means displacement, cold place. But outside of Gaza, when people see tents, they're like, oh my God, let's go camping, let's make a bonfire or something. The tents mean vacation or a road trip for them, but for us, it doesn't mean that. And even looking at the sky, everyone should be allowed to look at the sky safely and stargaze. But I remember learning this since I was young. I used to look at the sky. Obviously, I'm just a child. I want to look at the sky. And my parents used to always tell me, no, don't look at the sky or take pictures of the stars or anything, because there's always a drones watching you. You don't want them to think you're taking a picture of them or something. So no, don't look, don't stare. And I remember in the genocide, October 2023 and November, I used to look at the sky and see clouds. And we always have this debate with the journalists. I'm like, oh my God, I like the clouds today. And they're like, this is actually not a cloud, this is a smoke. And we're like, no, a cloud, no, a smoke. So we reached to a point where we are afraid of looking at the sky, not differentiating between smoke and clouds. And that's not something anyone should be familiar with, you know?
And there is one very chilling statistics that I'm going to read to the audience, that over 250 journalists have been killed in Gaza since 2023. And this number is bigger than the journalists who have been killed in both world wars, the Vietnam War, the wars in Yugoslavia, and the war in Afghanistan, all combined. And these are statistics from the United Nations. And you are a journalist yourself, and you have been documenting Gaza since 2023. And I would like to tell us about the conditions under which you and your colleagues have been working over the past 2 years.
First of all, these numbers are scary. Like, these numbers are beyond scary. Right now, the journalists that Israel killed, the number of them is higher than the number of journalists that are still alive in Gaza and reporting. The only reason you and I and we're all seeing this news from Gaza, it's because journalists are getting killed. and they don't always have internet connection to even post about what's happening. And if it wasn't for the Palestinian journalists who are risking their lives and still on the ground until now, you and I would have not known the truth or what's happening. All the media and the footage you see circulating and articles circulating online, it's all reported by Palestinian journalists. So we owe them a lot. We owe them the truth that the world is seeing right now. Today, I was speaking to Muhammad. He's a journalist, Muhammad Abu Safiya. He's a journalist in Gaza. He's married, he has a wife, and he has kids. He was able to evacuate his wife and kids outside of Gaza, but he was like, no, I don't want to leave Gaza. And he refused to leave Gaza, and he chose to stay and report on what's happening. And the whole time, every single day, I text him not knowing. Today he would reply, the message went through, is he still alive? Did Israel kill him, or what happened to them? The other day I was asking him about the starvation. Israel is making like a deliberate starvation in Gaza. And he told me, to be honest, like I can't go and report, on the people and on the starvation without being able to help. He was like, I'm starving myself. I can't find a lot of food myself, but he's like, I can't just put the camera and only report on the starvation without being able to do anything about it. He felt so hopeless in that moment, especially he's like, okay, if we posted all these photos of like starvation, what will change? And we keep trying to remind ourselves that no, it's our duty to keep posting, to keep sharing, to show the world what's happening, because we never know when will it stop or when will it change. The other day I started writing an article. It's been a month and I still didn't finish writing the article. I called it Who Reports on the Reporters? Because the reporters and journalists in Gaza, they report and show the world what's happening, but who reports on them? They report on families who lost loved ones while themselves they lost beloved ones and they're trying to grieve. I'll never forget Wael al-Tahdouh when he learned about the killing of his wife and family when he was live on TV. I'll never forget all the stories of the killing of the journalists. I never thought that we possibly live in an evil world where we will see journalists being killed live on TV. Bilal Jadallah is like the father of journalism in Gaza. He's the person, he used to be like the working in Press House Palestine, like the owner. He's the person who taught us what's it like to be a journalist in Gaza, the safety measures, how to be professional, what to do and what not to do. I remember taking a lot of workshops there and even giving a workshop in an English media club in Press House. And Bilal Jadallah, Israel killed him. And it made me wonder, like, how come the person who taught us journalism, safety measures, being professional, is the same person that Israel killed and targeted? It just shows that no one is safe. And every journalist that is still alive in Gaza right now is alive by luck.
And you also left Gaza and you're continuing your work from exile, from abroad, and you've become a global voice. And I wonder, how does it feel for you, and how do you see your role now in amplifying voices of other people in Gaza, voices of your fellow journalists and friends? How do you see your role now?
We all have a huge role to report and talk about what's happening in Gaza. Either we're inside of Gaza or outside of Gaza. Either we are Palestinian or from a different nationality. Personally, I try to always stay in touch with journalists, with people there, and to ask them, what do you want me to report on? Do you want me to report on your story? How can I do better? What can I do? Because I always make sure to amplify people's voices, not replace people's voices. And my book, The Eyes of Gaza, it was my way of documenting my story and the stories of the people that I came across. Because I always think with Meta shadow banning our content, I'm like, maybe one day Meta will decide to delete my page, to delete all of the pages of the pro-Palestine people who post content. And maybe it won't, like this content won't even be available online. That's why I wanted to be in a book. That way Meta can't just delete the book. That's why I wrote this book. And I also try to always write articles about what's happening, use my platform, and create my own content to keep raising awareness.
And I'm going to ask you a question from a journalist to another journalist. How do you think the media outside of Gaza, and especially in the West, in Europe, in the US, and in all these places, are they doing like a good job in covering the genocide, in covering everything that is happening in Gaza, or how do you think the narrative should change?
Oh my God, I wrote an article about this and it got published, I think, 3 or 4 days ago. It was called, the UN called it a genocide. Will Western journalists dare to? And in the article, I addressed how some journalists are afraid of calling it the word genocide, but are not afraid of living in a world where the genocide is allowed in the first place. And everyone, like you're a journalist, I'm a journalist, and I believe everyone in the room knows how powerful and important journalism and the media industry is. So everyone who's a journalist, you have this responsibility on reporting on the truth and reporting on what's happening and calling things what they are. You can't, for example, call a genocide a conflict. Sorry, English is my first language, but I learned the word conflict in school. It has 2 types: internal conflict, external conflict. For example, we're fighting over a hair clip. I want it, you want it. That's a conflict. But you can't kill people, starve an entire nation, and trap them inside and call that a conflict. So that's the thing. Like, I wish the media will do Palestinian story justice. I'll never forget there's a media outlet when Hind Rajab, a child, a literal child, got shot with 355 bullets. They didn't even mention her name and they referred to her as a woman. Okay, even if she's a woman, is that allowed? Either she's a woman, she's a child, she's a man, that shouldn't be allowed. And it makes me think how disgusting it is. That's something I do and everyone do. We keep talking about the children and the babies because they're the most innocent, so we try to appeal to people's emotions. But this shouldn't be happening. Not to kids, not to women, not to men, not to any human being, not even to animals.
And our time is running out, but there is one last thing I would like to ask you. We are talking today from Italy, and I'm sure you've seen footage of what happened in the country yesterday. The country was on strike in massive terms, I would say, almost unprecedented. So let's look at the audience, let's look at the public to, like, what is your message to someone who is not a journalist, but could still have a part in telling this story? And I don't know if you can see them, but there's many people in this theater today. So what would you tell them to kind of get them involved, and what can they do?
Honestly, I want to say I love you. To all the Italian people that are in here. Today I was looking at the footage, looking at the protest, looking at everything you're doing. And honestly, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, Plestia, what we can do, I was like, oh my God, maybe share, maybe repost. Like, I would have not imagined the scale of what you're doing. And it's you guys coming with these ideas. It's not any of us telling you what to do. And that just gives us hope in humanity and hope that we're seen and that people care and they're doing something about it. And the flotilla boat, the message reached Gaza. Either the boat reached Gaza or it didn't reach Gaza. That's not the point. It's the powerful message. It's feeling that people support you. We never expected the world to stop their lives or ask them, stop your life because of what's happening in Gaza. All what we've been asking for the past 2 years is to be seen. And honestly, Italian people showed us that we're more than seen. So truly, 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 thank you for all of that. And it's genuinely such an honor to be here between you guys, even if it's just online.
And I hope you can hear the applause.
Thank you.
I'll let them finish. Plestia, it has been an amazing time with you. It's great to have the chance to talk to you, and I hope that next time we'll be together on the same stage. Thank you very much, and thanks for your voice and your witnessing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for showing up here today. It means a lot. Thank you once again.
Thank you. Talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
E salutiamo Plestia e la sua testimonianza, ma come vi dicevo abbiamo un altro ospite per continuare a parlare di questi temi dal punto di vista della tecnologia, perché la tecnologia, le aziende tecnologiche con cui anche noi lavoriamo e viviamo ogni giorno sono coinvolte in questo discorso. Ed è un grande piacere altrettanto invitare sul palco Paul Bigger, che rappresenta Tech for Palestine, una organizzazione che si occupa di, con la tecnologia, aiutare la comunità palestinese e di fare critica nei confronti delle aziende tecnologiche, di costruire strumenti per la comunità palestinese e chi la sostiene. Paul, welcome to Wired Next Fest.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's start this by saying, why do we need to bring technology companies into this conversation? And why do we need to keep on having this conversation?
So I think a good way to think about this is as an extension of the Israeli lobby. In the United States and internationally, the war in Gaza, the occupation of Palestine, is enabled by Israeli influence. And Israel has significant influence in media, in politics, and technology can be thought as an extension of that. Israel has significant influence in technology companies, in technology policy, in specific individuals who are making decisions in technology companies, and it spreads throughout the technology ecosystem. And in particular, as we've seen on social media, a lot of the suppression that we're seeing on social media comes directly from specific Israelis, often who have been in the Israeli army and who were part of Israeli intelligence, who have made policy decisions that affects the words that we can see, the content that we can see online.
And recently there has been this report by Francesca Albanese, who is the Italian, we know her very well. She's the special rapporteur on the occupied territories in Palestine. She published this report titled From Economy of Occupation to Economy of Genocide. And there you can literally see kind of a chilling, evidence-based account of how much these companies are involved in this. And since we are all familiar with them, I would like to ask you to start with the social media level. So what is kind of the role the social media are playing in this, around these issues, and how are they involved? You pretty much already touched this, but I would like to develop this a little further.
So social media companies essentially control what we're able to see today. Significant numbers of people get their information from social media. All of us get an understanding of what we see from social media. And in particular, social media was an area where people in Palestine could get an understanding out of what was happening. Journalists on Instagram, for example. But what happens with each of these social media companies, and I'll focus a little bit on Meta, because I think it's worthwhile to be specific. The Chief Information Security Officer of Meta was in the Israeli army. He was in the Israeli intelligence service. In particular, there's this part of the Israeli army called Unit 8200. And Unit 8200 soldiers are spies. Essentially, they spy on Palestinians. But there's also this huge pipeline of people who get into the technology industry, and they work at these big tech companies. And so the Guy Rosen is the Chief Information Security Officer. So that is one of the most senior people at Meta. And they make significant policy decisions around what's allowed. And Meta has made significant policies. One of them is called Zionism as proxy. And what that means is that talking about Zionism, which is an ideology which is about the conquest of Palestine by Israel and is separate from religion, Judaism, has been called anti-Semitic. And it's not necessarily that in every single context and in every single way that it is used to remove all sorts of content, but it is a tool that allows the Israelis to shut down a significant amount of content. So the Israeli government supplies lists of articles, of posts that they would like taken down. They have a huge operation. Also, quasi-government agencies. There's the ADL. This is part of the Israeli lobby in America, and they work with almost all tech companies, and they provide lists of posts that should be taken down. The Zionism as proxy isn't the only way, though, that it's being done. In February last year, Meta introduced a new policy where political content would not receive reach, would not receive amplification within the algorithm. And this came at a critical time where the conversation was shifting between people being supportive of Israel after October 7th and people seeing that Israel was committing a genocide. And the conversation online was starting to shift. And so what Meta did was they shut down all of political speech from getting reach outside of your core audiences. If you didn't already follow someone, you were not going to see their political speech.
And something that has become common also for Italian users recently in connection with the conversation around Gaza is shadow banning, which has been historically impacting voices like Plestia's and other Palestinian voices, but it's now widespread, basically. And from conversation I've had with people, with activists, with people who are also engaged in a minimal level in this conversation, they also experience that. So can you tell us what shadow banning is? How does it work? And why it's so unequally distributed, I would say?
So shadow banning is a term that's used to describe when people no longer get distribution on social media platforms. So it used to be on social media that you followed people and you got their content. Right? Every post that they would get, you would get it in roughly chronological order. And what shifted over the last couple of years as these social media companies turned into content companies was that instead of just showing you the people you followed, they would introduce algorithms, and the algorithms would decide what content. People talk about this as their feed. And so because they control the algorithms and they can have inputs into the algorithms, they can decide what you see and what you don't see. So this isn't just something that affects Palestine, but it is something that has been heavily used about Palestine. So I talked about the no politics, right? Or the political reach. What they're saying, or what this policy affects, is, well, political content no longer gets distributed by the algorithm, and so that limits the content that you're able to see. And around Palestine, suppression, flagging by Israeli government, it might not take it off the platform, but it will prevent you from seeing it in a lot of cases and prevent individuals from having their posts in general getting the reach that they used to.
Yeah, and that is also affecting news outlets, I guess.
Oh, it's affecting everybody, yeah. It is not very clear that there's almost no transparency around how this happens. You can't see, has your post had its reach limited, except in as several specific cases that Meta allows you to see. So it's something really where if you are being shadow banned, you have no idea except that your posts aren't performing as well as they used to.
There is something that you mentioned before about the cultures of technology companies and the kind of culture they're also pushing in their own digital spaces. And in this sense, we were discussing this yesterday, TikTok has been making the news recently, and I don't know how much that has resonated in Italy already, but what is happening there? Because I think it's a clear example of this climate surrounding tech companies these days.
Yeah, the TikTok situation is fascinating because it really shows what happens when you don't parrot the American line and the American foreign policy. So TikTok in the US was forcibly divested. They were forced to sell it, and the reason that they were forced to sell it was because of the amount of pro-Palestine content that was on it. And this has been discussed by the people who forced this, right? So this was, there was originally an anti-China push, but it really did not get any traction. And after October 7th, they turned it into a pro-Israel push. They said all these students, all the young people are talking about Palestine on TikTok, and so we are going to force them to sell it. And they have, in fact, forced them to sell it. It is now going through. It is being sold to Larry Ellison, who is, I think, currently the world's richest man, who is a very staunch Zionist, who has given a lot of money to the IDF, the Israeli army, and who has been extremely critical of pro-Palestine activists within his own company, and has said, if you want to support Palestine, this is not the place to do it. And there was a lot of different steps by the way that this happened. It was the Biden government who initially did it, and then Trump got to actually implement it. And along the way, they took several steps to shut down the pro-Palestine content. So even before it was sold, most pro-Palestine content had already been removed from TikTok. I mentioned the Zionism as policy proxy. TikTok was made take that policy on directly. They got a new head of content who was again in the IDF. So these are the tools that we see at Meta and at other tech companies were very much brought in to the TikTok situation. But in addition, AIPAC, which is the political lobby in America, forced that sale, created law specifically to that's specifically named ByteDance, which is TikTok's parent company, to force that sale. And no one is really pretending that it wasn't about Palestine. It was very clear from the start, and everybody who was involved in it is saying, yeah, we did this because the kids were talking about Palestine.
And are there also forms of resistance in the companies? Like, are they really so monolithic, or did you see kind of employees or any kind of workers that are responding to this climate in ways? Because in the past we had walkouts, we had protests, we had kind of people leaving the companies and joining other kind of ventures. So is the movement at the moment in the companies?
Almost every tech company, or every big tech company, has a worker movement within it, and in some cases without it as well. So for example, No Azure for Apartheid. Azure is Microsoft's cloud. No Azure for Apartheid is a group that advocates about Microsoft's involvement in the genocide, and Microsoft recently had to make significant concessions, in part because of the work that was done by No Azure for Apartheid. They leak documents. They work with, for example, Francesca Albanese in informing UN reports about what's happening. They've done significant actions internally. A lot of people have been fired. In Google, their organizer group is called No Tech for Apartheid, and 50 of them got fired for occupying the head of Google Cloud's office, because Google Cloud is so heavily involved directly in the genocide. And then they immediately fired 50 of them, and many of them who were sort of adjacent to them, not even the people who occupied the offices, because they're so afraid of these workers.
And let's put this down to the ground. So when we are talking about tech companies involved, participated, and kind of collaborating to all of this, there have been like journalistic exposés of Microsoft and Google where it was shown that their products are being used in Gaza, for instance, and these are Gemini, ChatGPT, and other commercial tools that we all use also in our daily lives. So is there really a difference between what we use and what is used in Gaza at the moment?
So the AI that's being used in Gaza, and that's being used as part of the genocide by the Israeli army, while they are using special instances of it, they're using special contracts and that sort of thing, it is pretty much the same technology that we're using. The consumer technology that's being put in front of us is the same technology that's being used by the IDF in many different cases. And this is one of the reasons that people are trying to get this technology labeled as dual use. So instead of thinking, oh, this technology is just sort of like normal, having to recognize this technology is actually a weapon. It is being weaponized. And so things like cloud technology, Israel's ability to scale up the genocide that happened, especially at the start of the genocide, was because these companies built data centers for them and allowed them to use these public data centers that are the same thing that all the companies that we're using, all the apps that we're using, they use the same data centers as the Israeli army. And it is important to recognize that allowing someone who's committing a genocide to use the technology is something that allows them to scale it up. And the metaphor that I use is the It's like during the Holocaust, right? It was the train lines, it was the gas chambers, it was IBM provided tabulation machines, which were things that allowed them to scale the genocide up from something that was killing people on the streets of Berlin to millions of people in camps that were being exterminated. And it's the exact same thing here. Israel would not have been able to do this without the participation of Amazon, of Google, of Microsoft, and of Palantir.
And then, of course, there is also like the actual military AI that has been, again, exposed by journalists at Plus 927 magazine and local call opposition news outlets in Israel. And they showed how AI is assisting the army when they have to strike buildings and people in Gaza. So what do we know about that at the moment?
So I just want to push back on the word where they have to strike. It is really an enabling technology.
Yeah.
The main way that AI has been used here is in targeting. So instead of humans having to decide who they were going to target, and they would use this to target maybe Hamas leaders or something along those lines, they used AI, and the AI ranked all of the people in Gaza, and they said, these are the top ones that we're going to kill. And very much you can think of it like your Netflix algorithm. Like Netflix recommends the movies that you're going to watch, but often Netflix recommends movies that are bad, right? Movies that you don't like. And it's exactly the same sort of thing. The AI tells you who to kill, right? But it's a very flawed technology. It's a flawed approach because AI is not something that is foolproof. And they're using this to kill not only people that they think are fighters, but also their families and their neighbors because of the types of bombs and munitions that they use and the specific policy that they have of targeting them at night when they're around their families. So I think it's best not to think of AI as actually something that is contributing something to this. AI is much more something that they can use as plausible deniability, in the same way that they use all these tools, like settlers sitting in front of aid trucks, right? If they wanted to, they could get aid in, right? It's not that difficult to get aid, right? It's 50 miles from Tel Aviv to Gaza. But they have all these explanations and reasons that they can say, well, aid is so difficult to get in for this reason and this reason and this reason. And it's the same thing with AI, right? AI is when the bombing happens, we can say, oh, maybe a mistake was made in that particular case. Hard to say. AI made the decision.
Yeah, and I have another question for you about Tech for Palestine. So, can you tell us what is the kind of work that you're doing, and what is your goal with the kind of approach you have on technology?
So I mentioned earlier how Israel has influences in all parts of our society. And so what Tech for Palestine does is it's creating a movement against that Israeli influence. And we are an incubator for projects that support the liberation of Palestine. So we are currently supporting 72 projects. We add about 2 projects a week. And there's some really interesting projects. So for example, one is Boycat, which is an app that has an adorable little cat on it that you can use to scan at the groceries whether the food that you buy or the things that you buy were made in Israel or were made by other complicit companies. We even have a project that's made nearby in Milan that is targeting it's called ethical trade funds, and it is targeting ETFs, which are a specific financial way that people use for investments. And it's working with trade unions and other pension funds and that sort of thing. People who have large amounts of money in their pensions that are being used to invest. They work with them to make sure that their investments are ethical.
I see. And we have one last question. You're not going to hear it from me, but as I told you, Wired has a partnership with local schools. Mm-hmm. So we have one student who is about to join us on stage, and students decided certain panels and events of the festival, and so they have one question for you.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, since, as you said before, social media had some impact in getting to know this conflict. I and I think many others, only got to know this massacre, more than conflict, with social media. How can we inform ourselves without getting dragged into propaganda, and how can we get to know what and how it's really happening?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's two main issues with social media. One, as you say, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda, that kind of thing. Personally, I always wait typically a day or something before something that I read about I understand to be true. I think that we need to have a journey between facts that we hear and a fact that become, that you sort of internally recognize as being true. And in terms of suppression, that's the other one. I think that what we're going to find very soon is that we will not be able to get our messages out. And so I think that we have to start looking at not just social media, but actually offline methods. Things such as protests, but actually things like handing out flyers and sort of old-fashioned ways of distributing information, I think are going to become increasingly relevant as social media succumbs not just to Israeli influence, but to authoritarian influence as well.
Thank you very much.
Paul, our time is up, so thank you very much for your work, for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks to the audience for being here, thanks to technicians and translators, and mi sento di aggiungere anche grazie a Wired per questo spazio, non è scontato di questi tempi.